Good evening. Welcome. It's so nice to see what have become some wonderful familiar faces over the last few Tuesday evenings. And welcome to those who are joining us for the third of this three-part series. My name is Mara Braunfeld, and I am Hadar's Director of Children and Families, and I'm very excited to welcome you here this evening. So the way our evening is going to work tonight is both Effy and I will introduce ourselves a little bit, and then we will get a chance to know a little bit about who's in our Zoom room and joining us this evening, and then we're really going to spend some time digging into Devash, Hadar's new Parsha magazine, and being able to explore the what of learning with our kids. Those that have been with us for the last couple of weeks, we've thought about the why of learning with our kids and the how of learning with our kids. So now we get an example of the what. So again, I'm Mara Braunfeld. My professional hat introduction is that I'm Hadar's Director of the Children and Families Division, and my personal hat introduction, which is equally as important in this space, is that I am a mom of three kids. Ronit, who is 10 and a half, Rabbi is 8 and a half, and Hannah is 4 and a half. And I think that both of those roles, maybe even the parent even more so, are really important for this evening. Effy.
Hi, thanks, Mara. My name is Effy Unterman. I'm the Director of Content at Hadar, and also a maker of Devash and also a user of Devash, which we'll see today. My kids are 9, 6, and 4. And yeah, so excited to spend the evening with you and to learn with you today.
So we want to go through, and we're going to put this on the screen, go through an upcoming weekly Torah portion, Parashah of Devash. This will be good advanced prep for some of us, and be able to dive into each of the sections a little bit, so that we can explain a little bit about what's the thinking and the goal behind these particular sections, and then also how can we use it. And again, for those who are already using it, or those who see some of these things and ideas come to you, we want to invite you to be able to share that as well as we go along. So feel free absolutely to interrupt and to share those ideas in the chat, or unmute as we go. But Effy, maybe will you start by giving us a little bit of big picture Devash, and to get us into this?
For sure. I'm actually going to pull one up on the screen if that's okay. I loved your comments, all of you. There's certainly a wide range of uses for this document, which has a ton in it. But I'd like to actually mention something that I think relates to a comment that I saw a couple times, which is the issue of preparation and of kind of needing to feel mastery of the text in order to work with it. And I want to push back against that a little bit. Part of our goal in using Devash is that it should be okay for people not to know, not to feel like they already know the answers. That's actually one of our goals, is to be able, that everyone on their level should be able to say, I have questions about this, and we're going to think through it together. That's part of what makes learning, jointly so wonderful in relationship with other people, that we can actually share insecurities, vulnerabilities, or things that we don't know, and just talk it out. And we're hoping that over time, if you're familiar with what the sections are, what they do, that you'll be okay maybe even giving it a first look with your children, grandchildren, and be okay not knowing. I think that's part of everyone experiences that learning Torah, learning the Parsha, and learning Torah. So I'd like to keep that in mind as we go through these sections. There are a lot. I actually can't follow the text while I speak. I'm so bad at doing that. So if someone if someone has a chat that they just want me to answer, you can just like unmute and talk. Or if like Mara, maybe if you see something that you want me to say, you can just poke me or something. Okay. What we're I also just want to, before we start, I also want to just point out that there are a lot of different kinds of sections here, and they can be used in different ways. I don't think you should have pressure on you to feel like I have to make it through it all and do everything. Like it can be, like Mara started off, you can use it the way it works best for you guys. But let's go through it so you have a familiarity, and we can discuss a little like what does work for you. The opening section is a summary of the weekly parsha. And what we try to do here, a lot of summaries of the parsha for children include other material and include some editorializing and interpretation. What we've tried, and that's not bad, it's just a different, it's an approach. What we've tried to do here is keep it very strictly close to the text you find in the Torah when it's opened up. There is of course interpretation. There are other stories that come along in the tradition that might fit in as well, but we've just chosen as a pedagogical move to kind of stick with the text. And actually what's exciting about that is that if you see something in the Parsha summary that you think, oh, that's interesting, I want to look more and read more, hopefully when you go back to the actual text of the Torah, you see something very similar to what you see here. And you don't hopefully feel lost, like it's bringing you back in a very accurate, close way to the way the text is written. Also, it's not comprehensive. This is just a list of salient points that we thought kids, that's another point that I wanted to make also. I guess you're right. Like I've seen a couple of comments that you guys are learning it like just adults together. We saw that the goal was to make this for children who are literate, who can read. So it's true, like my 6-year-old who's reading but may not read something like this independently is probably too young to do this by herself without parents doing it with her. 7 is probably the youngest that I've seen kids kind of use it independently in a very deep way. And yeah, although we say like it's for kids 7 to 11, it's really kids 7 to like all ages, not just for kids. Like this is kind of where Hadar becomes a little bit nerdy, and we just really want people to stretch, as high as they can go. And it's true. I think that a lot of this content is totally applicable and meaningful to adults as well. So no fear.
So I want to jump in to say that one of the ways that our family uses the Mava parasha, the what's in this week's parasha section, is I read it first as a quick overview and reminder to myself of where we are in the context of the story, and then we'll use that as a way to help situate it for my kids. One of the things that I didn't say in my introduction, but that I think is an important point to bring in. My 3 kids are not Jewish day school kids. My 3 kids go to an independent private school, and so they're not coming with a Jewish day school background. They're not bringing this home from school, and so we use these bullet points from what's in this week's parasha as a way to recontextualize and sort of get back into the story from where we left off last week. It's also a great chance for kids to look at that, and for me as a parent to say, when you look at this, what are questions that you have? Like, what's interesting to you in this? What do you our friends last week who were on with us will remember that the Pedagogy of Partnership is very fond of asking, what do you notice and what do you wonder? And those are great questions. You don't have to be a teacher to know that kind of a question. It's a question that we as parents should be asking our kids all of the time, to say, let's look at this together and let's see what what questions do we have about this? What's strange? What's interesting? What do we want to know more about? You could probably spend a half hour or more just never leaving this front cover, just based on the summary of the Torah portion, and pulling out and picking out kids' questions from there.
Yeah, thanks, Mara. Such a good point. That again, you don't have to know it in advance to just talk and say, "Oh, this is interesting to me." Yeah, why? Like follow the thread. Okay, let's move along. This is there are three sections that are very heavy on analysis and really do require a lot of focus. My 9-year-old is pretty comfortable having conversations in these sections. It could be that a 7 and 8-year-old may need some more scaffolding or some more parent help. That's totally reasonable. Or even younger kids, maybe there are ideas here where questions can be shared with them in more conceptual ways and ideas without going too deeply into the text. But certainly I think there's a wide range of applicability here, especially if a parent is willing to sit down with the kids and be involved. The Midrash section, a Midrash there's a little explanation of Midrash up here in the corner, which there's basically some, the rabbis in the Talmud might notice things in the text that are open-ended, that might be nuanced. So Midrash is kind of interpretation that flows oftentimes that flows out of the text. And what we've tried to do is identify a Midrash from rabbinic literature that applies somewhere in the parsha, and present it with some scaffolding, with some introductory background, and with some explanation of like where we take that, in addition to questions that can be discussed about the Midrash. Now, again, this does not require prior knowledge. That the text can be read together in a pair. It can be discussed. We can check each other for understanding, and the questions that we provide are usually pretty good for discussions. This can be table discussions. These can be discussions between kids, even if they haven't read the Midrash. Like, it's often story and narrative based, so it can also be told over to even younger kids.
I'm gonna jump in quickly and just pick up on what a couple of you have recently added into the chat about the aesthetics of everything and the illustrations, because that's also a piece that, especially for those of us who have younger children, this is also a great entry point at various places throughout the magazine, for them to be able to see it as a little bit as a storybook, and to be able to see some of the characters come to life, or look at what the landscape is and what does that tell us about sort of where we are in the Torah and what's happening with our learning. So we definitely encourage you to use the illustrations as another kind of part of the text, right? And another jumping off point for being able to notice things and wonder about things.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. The next section is Parshanut, which is commentary. Sometimes when we learn the Torah, we're told one perspective, and we're raised thinking like that's the truth, and it is true. There is truth to the perspectives we're taught. The goal of this section is to present multiple perspectives, to show that people can have different, sometimes conflicting ideas when they interpret verses from the Torah. And that there are such differing voices within the tradition, and also that we ourselves we're enabled, empowered to come to the text and also have a perspective. So the goal here is to a little bit complicate our understanding of like what the meaning of the verses is, but also to inculcate in our homes as a value to respect other opinions, to listen for multiple perspectives, and to expect that there can be different ways of looking at the same thing. So we feel that these also can kind of generate really great discussion.
Effy?
Yeah.
This is Susan in the Susan and David window.
Hi,
Hi. Can you take a step back? Excuse me for a sec. Can you take a step back? Can you go back one page for a moment?
Yeah.
Can you explain? I know where the box says Bereshit in both spots. The 33. I don't even know how to read the citation.
Uh-huh.
33:4 and 32:27.
Mhm.
I know
So
that those are from Bereshit. Those are in the Torah. But when it's Bereshit Rabbah, where is that coming from?
So that is a midrashic text.
And
There are,
then okay.
yeah, there are multiple collections of midrash, and that's one of the collections is Bereshit Rabbah.
And then on the next page, where the box is, that's coming from the if you go back to your the next page that
Over
you were
here?
just on, and these are coming from, you were just commenting on it.
These are commentaries. These are commentators. So here you'll have a verse from the Torah, Bereshit 32:27, chapter and verse. And then there are two commentators that we presented here. One is Rashi, who lived 1,000 years ago in France, and the other one is Rabbi, who lived in Portugal 600 years ago. And these are and then we quote their opinions, the commentaries that they wrote on that verse from the Torah.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
This is Joshua and Marcus. I just have sort of bouncing off of that. I found, I'm doing this with the first grader, that just the midrash part is harder to sort of understand. I understand, but it's hard to sort of maybe for me to convey that to her. I tended to skip over that and go straight to the interpretation, because that's closer to the shot, the straight meaning of the text and like what's going on with it. I don't know if is there a reason why you decided to put that second, or is that just circumstance?
Yeah, I wouldn't read too much into the order of the sections. A lot of it goes. We have a design studio that we work with to create the beautiful illustrations. So some of it is just the choice of the designer. But I have the same experience. I often can't, and I don't push to do it with my first grader. Sometimes she'll see my fourth grader doing it, and she'll ask, what is this about? And that's where it's like kind of on me to read it myself and then summarize it for her. But you're right. Like, I don't know if I would do that whole section with my first grader either.
I want to reemphasize something that that Effy said from the beginning, which is that while the magazine is there for people to read cover to cover if they want to, this is also intended to be modular, right? To pick and to choose the different things. And there are some sections that might lend themselves better to kids on the older elementary school or middle school age range, and some we'll get to these in a moment, that lend themselves better to those on the younger elementary age of the age spectrum. And it also could be things that actually, depending on your child's learning style, right, and the way that their brains work and that they think about it, it actually draws me back to something that that Ethan Tucker shared in the first week with all of us, which was that one of the amazing pieces that he found about learning with each of his children is that it gave him different kinds of insight into who they are as thinkers and as learners. And so for some of our incredibly analytical children, right, we can use the midrash section or the parshanut section. For our visual learners, we're going to pick up on some of the illustrations, and that's going to pique their interest and lead us into something. For our kids who are really drawn into thinking about relationships and people, right, we're going to find the characters that we're drawn to, or the conflicts between characters, especially in these Genesis narratives, and that's going to be the thing that draws us in. So, well, I would say if you have a few minutes to spare in our busy parent lives before you want to sit down and do some learning with your kids, it certainly is helpful to kind of flip through and have a roadmap maybe in your own head of what might be interesting. But there's a lot that we can let our kids guide us in the learning just by flipping through it together. What are the things that sort of start to spark their interest?
I hope that you'll also notice that it's a very Hebrew forward kind of publication, but our goal is also to make it accessible to even those who cannot decode Hebrew. And we try to do this in a couple ways. One is we translate all the Hebrew text into English, and Hebrew, even Hebrew terms, even common terms that we use are, even when they're spelled in Hebrew letters, we also transliterate into English code so that someone doesn't have to be a Hebrew decoder to use it. And then Hebrew terms often appear transliteration more often than in Hebrew letters at all. So the goal is that even without Hebrew skill, there's a kind of Hebrew learning without even requiring the skill of already knowing how to read Hebrew.
Effy,
Mhm.
I just want to say that I think you guys did a remarkable job with that, from coming from a family that doesn't speak Hebrew.
Thank you.
I mean,
Well,
it's remarkable. I have never actually been able to. I love the way that you highlight the term that you're analyzing and that's in question, and you highlight it in English also. And then I've never seen that done before, and we're really using it in that way. So thank you.
I'm really happy to hear that. I'm glad that the goal, that's exactly what the goal was. So I'm glad that it's working. Thank you. Yeah, the font, I've heard that about the font. Definitely something to, I don't know, when we start to have these like redesign conversations with our designer, that's definitely something that we're going to bring up, but I appreciate the feedback. This next section,
it's not always, it's like only in certain use cases
right.
that like he finds it really hard. And I don't know if it, like, he does have some learning challenges, so I don't know if it's that, but I find that sometimes they're so stylized
Mm-hmm.
that like I can see where he's coming from. Like, yeah, I can see
Yeah,
why that looks like a different letter.
I totally see it also. So I think we didn't really realize that that would become an issue when we first kind of came out with the style, but it's definitely something that we're going to bring up with the designer as we continue to refine and kind of rethink it. I hope that you'll see it continue to change over time. The next section that we have is the halacha section, which the goal of this section is to help to bring the parsha to life by demonstrating a way in which it influences Jewish practices that are specifically Jewish, even in the modern day. And that's by tracing an idea that starts with the parsha, which was in the Torah from 3,500 years ago, to Talmudic or rabbinic texts from 2,000 years ago, to texts or practices that are current to today. And actually what's also cool about this is as people are trying to look for ways to bring their learning to life, it also offers an opportunity to choose Jewish practices, not just by rote or because that's what was done, but because this is what we learned. You know, this is something that we experienced at our Shabbat table or in our Shabbat home while learning together as a family. And it becomes more of an intentional spiritual practice and not a rote practice. So the goal is to kind of to do that, to meld the learning into real life.
So I want to ask us a quick question, and you can use your raise hand function or any emoji that you would like. But how many of us in when our kids have come at us with the question of why, have to almost bite our tongues because what we want to say is because I said so, but we know that's not the answer that will be a good enough answer to give, right? Like, it's okay, you can admit it. I have wanted to say because I said so, even though I know that's not a good parenting answer. Right. And I think that one of the pieces, like Effy shared, that is so powerful about this halacha section is because we have an opportunity to give our kids more than a because I said so or because Judaism said so as an answer, meaning it gives a deeper explanation as to why. And for kids who are seeing different kinds of Jewish practices and are curious about why we do what we do, for those of us as adults who have maybe done things in a certain way but never really known why, or for those of us who are taking on Jewish practices and customs in a way that is different from maybe how we grew up, this is a great section to be able to bring that added meaning and that sort of practicality into what we're doing that is connected each week to what we're reading in the Torah.
Thanks, Mara. The next sections here are probably in our like lower ask kind of category, and might also work with a broader range of learners and also younger kids. The section here, what's going on here, Mazeh, what's going on, that's less analytical. It kind of maybe fits more into the category of like a typical Devar Torah or like some kind of very simple basic learning on the Parsha. It usually asks a question about a word or phrase or moment that has some ambiguity to it and kind of fills that out. It's not like a moralizing section, but we hope that it offers something of interest and complicates a little bit, like something we might have been wondering about the Parsha. The moment in Hebrew is a section that we really love. Again, we're pretty Hebrew forward. And here too, the goal is to show how biblical Hebrew, like the language that the Torah was written in, actually still lives on and is applicable in today modern Israeli Hebrew. So we highlight a word from a verse in the Torah and show how, like, what phrases, what words, hopefully their words or things that match nicely with some cute illustrations, and kids can latch on to that. Mara, did you want to talk
For
about
those
that?
of us, well, I would say as a practical use, for those of us who have kids who want to move around as they're learning, this is a great opportunity. If the words match up, to say, okay, go find something, in your room that's on this page. Like, here are connected Hebrew words from our Rega Sheli Brit this week. Go find something. Go find one of these things in our home, in our apartment, they'll come back with all of that. The other practical or like tool piece tip that I want to share is for those of us with younger kids who might be just starting to learn the letters of the Aleph Bet, but who aren't reading Hebrew yet. This is actually a great opportunity to take what's called the shoresh, the root of the Hebrew word, and to learn those 3 letters. So that's actually a very small thing that even for our youngest kids, we can point out and we can highlight for them. Because it's a really cool thing to be able to see that so many Hebrew words are built on with one root as those letters, and so that's an opportunity to bring some learning for our younger ones as well, and get them excited about Hebrew and get them excited about text, and they can find those letters in various other places too.
Yeah, and it also could be a fun challenge to try to use the Hebrew word in sentences and conversations over the course of Shabbat, like a little family challenge. Like, how many times can you use this word? It's great. Then the next one is a debate, which comes across really cute. Like there's a question, and we give some suggested answers. You can have an argument over it. Actually, most of these questions that we present are really serious questions that appear like in the Talmud or in traditional commentaries, and people have like seriously sat down and written like serious texts about them. But we're hoping this is a more of a fun, lighthearted kind of treatment of what could be a very serious question for consideration and for contemplation. And the goal here is also to invite whoever's in the room to be like participants in a discussion about the Parsha without needing other texts to even do it.
I would say that with my 6-year-old, that this is like, he loves that. He loves the idea of, and I think it's just great pedagogically for them to understand that, like, you can have like arguing or debating is a good thing to do. And you can, like, it doesn't matter who's right or who's wrong, that like you can take 2 sides of an issue. I think it's so powerful in and of itself. And he really loved that. Like, I'm going to pretend to say it's this, and you're going to pretend to say it's that. Okay, why would you say that? I love that. I think
that's great. And we also want to, we give a couple of bullet points for sort of each side of the argument, but that's only a starting place. And we want to encourage people to, to come up with their own additional ideas and thoughts as as you're arguing one side or the other. And the other thing, Suzanne, that you said that sort of harkens back to the Parsha Nut section, the commentary section, where we will present, like, here are two different opinions of this one particular verse or idea, because it's a yes and, right? Like, we can hold multiple opinions, and that's a life skill that we want to teach our kids as well. So if we're able to engage them from a very young age, to be able to not only debate and say what they want to say to try to convince whoever they're talking to of their opinion, but also really to critically listen. These are, like, Torah learning leads to great life skills, right? This is about active listening. This is about thinking critically and holding multiple opinions. And who doesn't want to teach their kids those kinds of skills as well?
Yeah, and to realize that we're presenting both sides here because there's truth to both, right? It's awesome. Thanks, Mara. These next sections, I think they're very special, actually. The scavenger hunt on the left-hand side is different, we hope, from a quiz. Typically, when you're quizzed on something, to feel good at the end, you have to know the answers already, right? Like, you're good if you know the answers, and you're not good if you don't. This is the opposite. We hope that answers have nothing to do with this. The whole point of this is having questions. And the goal here is to drive a person or a student or a learner back to the text to realize that we have questions, and that's okay. And let's find out the answers. Let's open up the book and try to discover and learn. That should be the experience. So what we've done is provided questions. Some of these questions are like big, really close to the core of the narrative. Some of the questions are like, I promise you, the greatest scholars do not know the answer to these questions. Like, they're random and about details that aren't really that important. But that doesn't matter, because what matters is that when you have questions, you can open up the text and discover and learn. So that's what this is. It's divided. Every parsha is divided into 7 aliyot, 7 sections, and the first 7 questions correlate to those 7 sections, and then the last 3 are parsha wide. They could be found anywhere. Some of them are way too hard for me to do, so we don't do them in my family. But my 9-year-old does sit with a chumash open, with the Torah open, and we spend 20 minutes on this, going through it together. This can also be something that is part of the synagogue experience, that if the Torah is being read publicly, you can guide your child and say, well, here's a question to look for now. And it's a way of almost inviting children into that experience of being part of. Very often they come into shul or into the synagogue, and the experience of a child is like shush or leave. We want the opposite to happen. We want children to feel like, no, the ritual learning of the Torah that the Jewish people go through every week, that you're a part of that too. And this is one way of doing that, by inviting kids, all of us really, to open up the book and have questions and just look for learning there.
One quick piece I want to add for those of you who either have Devash already or you're going to be getting it, that you can look forward to in the next book, right? Effy, this feature starts in Shemot, that we have the aliyot that are listed, is that we have a way of being able to help our kids find these answers in the scavenger hunt questions in the text, and you'll start to see in subsequent issues on this page that it will list where you can, the chapter and verse for that particular aliyah. So for the first aliyah, just you will know, because it'll say that you'll be looking at Exodus chapter 1 verse 1 through chapter whatever it is and happens to be, right? And so it will give us a little bit of a a guide and a scaffold to be able to help our kids navigate through the printed text and to be able to find that.
Even as many Chumashim also indicate where the aliyot breaks are, but we're hoping this makes it even more clear and accessible. And the right-hand section here is even more about inviting kids into the text of the Torah, and even more where we get a little bit nerdy on our end, which we're very proud of actually, because we don't think there's a lot of children's Parsha resources that explain like the little notes you see above the Hebrew letters or Hebrew grammar to kids. We're kind of like diving straight in, and saying like, this is part of it too, guys. And hopefully it can be taught in a way that's understandable and a little bit fun too. And again, the goal is to say like the thing that happens like on the bima, it's not just for a handful of experts and adults. Like that's something that we can all have access to and learn about and enjoy and realize that there's like, that's also part of learning Torah is looking at the text and trying to get a better grasp of it. As we move on, these are the last two content sections of Devash. The Bona Darbeleza, tell me more about this, is a kind of lean in to something that you might have experienced in the magazine. Like if there were something that come up and there's maybe a chance to explain a little bit more about that concept or that question, then this will appear. This might appear as its own section, like you see it here, or it might appear as a small sidebar or thought bubble, if it's just a smaller point to explain. But the goal is to show how even the smallest things can also be unpacked, and there can be more learning done there. And on the right-hand side, you see a little biographical sketch of someone who you might have encountered while reading through Devash. So someone who already came up in the magazine is now being spotlighted, and you get a sense of the story of that person and their background, where they came from and what their influence is. And we hope that this kind of like also gives it more color, that the people we're encountering aren't just names and dates, but they lived lives and had influence and there's stories about them. So that's the goal of this section. And the back has the answer to the scavenger hunt questions and directs you back to us to give us your feedback and to ask for more.
So we would love to sort of pause here. I know it was the magazine itself is a lot to digest, hearing about all of these different pieces and strategies and ways that we can use all of this is a lot to digest and to think about. And we want to leave the last number of minutes that we have together to be able to explore some of your questions, some of the questions and challenges that maybe came up earlier through the chat, or other things that you're starting to think about. The other thing that I'm going to put in the chat now as we start to share all of this is that our amazing colleagues from Pedagogy of Partnership through Hadar help to create a family learning guide for Devash as a way to get us started. We are going to share this with along with the recording of this session. We're going to share this out with people as well. But you get first dibs at the Devash family learning guide. So a number of the things that we shared this evening are in here, and there's more tips and tricks and tools and things like that that are in here as well. So we would love for people to use that and to take advantage of that family learning guide. I think maybe let's talk for a moment or so about a question that came up from a couple of people in terms of how do we do this as a full family with kids of different ages, and how do we sort of hold space for all of that. So I want to share a couple of things from personal experience and from what we've started to hear from other families who are using Devash. So the first thing is that if you want to make this a full family experience with kids of different ages, then that's how you're going to set it up, and that will be the thing that drives and dictates the choices that you make with your kids about which parts of Devash that you're using with them. There's also an opportunity to be able to say, I'm going to spend some quality time one-on-one with each of my kids and be able to do this with them for my case, in 3 different ways, right? And that's wonderful too. There's something special about being able to do learning as a full family unit. And there's also something really special about being able to take that one-on-one kind of time to be able to engage in the learning as well. Certainly when it's one-on-one, you can hone in on exactly where that child is at and where you're at, and you can, as Pedagogy of Partnership shares with their triangle, right? It's imagine 3 points of a triangle being parent and child and Torah, and you can connect those. So there's no one right way to do this. I will share that as our family has been using Devash, usually on Shabbat is when it's the quietest kind of time that works well for us. Although I shared with someone recently that if if your family has something like Taco Tuesdays, you could also have something like Torah Thursdays, right? Like it doesn't have to be that you do this on Shabbat. It's worked well for us to do that. And there are ways when you're in that piece of content to be able to invite in different ways of participation. So I will tell you that a couple of weeks ago, I said it's Devash learning time with my own 3 children and my 2 incredible nieces. So we span the age range from 4.5 up to 10.5 with a lot in the middle. And we sat, and what I thought was maybe going to be like a 10-15 minute conversation, if I could pull it off, turned into, I think, close to 35-40 minutes of them just being in it. And it's because when I saw the younger ones drifting a little bit, we were in the midrash section, and I said, okay, I need 2 of you who will act this out because I need help understanding how this midrash is working. So I need someone to be this rabbi. I need someone to be this rabbi. And instantly, right, it pulled my little ones in, and it gave them something to be able to do and act out, and they remembered it in a different kind of a way. So being able to encourage play along with this doesn't have to be an only cognitive and discussion-based kind of learning. If you have a child who needs to build and move their hands and manipulate things as they're learning, great. Like, here this week we're learning about Yaakov and the sulam and the ladder. So like, could you make that for me out of Legos? Like, let's build that together. What might that look like, right? So finding the things that will keep our different aged kids engaged is a way to be able to do learning as a family and to be able to make the examples really sort of resonate. I wonder if Effy, if you have examples of things like that, or if any of you who have been using Devash have those kinds of examples and tricks to share as well.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point, Mara. There in the Devash that I was just showing, which is for not this week's parsha, but the week after, next week's. So here in the Parsha Nut section, the commentary section, where we have 2 different commentators with different opinions about how to interpret something. So, the opinion, whatever, I don't want to go through the whole thing in detail, but here's a verse that could be interpreted in multiple ways. Rashi says that it had to do with going to sing, and Abarbanel says that it has to do with being in a hurry, right? So singing and being in a hurry are 2 things that kids can relate to and also do really well. So even if it's a cognitive, almost analytical, interpretive discussion in the text, but it could be that for kids who need to be moving or need to act it out, it could be that we can say, oh, well, here Rashi's talking about a song. Why don't we do a song together? to kind of like act out or bring to life Rashi's opinion. And the opinion that's about being in a hurry and being on the run, maybe we do a race outside. Maybe we, try to do something really quick and time ourselves. So there are a lot of also ways if and again, this doesn't take being a scholar, it just takes being like tuned in as a parent, and maybe thinking about it for a minute. We've hopefully actually have some tips and tricks in the document we gave you, but that kind of thing can happen, with almost any of these sources. Differences of opinion can also be acted out in dialogue sometimes. So if you can have one kid in the family play one perspective, another kid in the family play another one, and there can be like, you can put the words that we have here almost in the words of the children, or in the voices of the children. And that also kind of invites them more into it and allows them to be engaged, not just like reading and thinking, but actually acting out, being part of it.
Are there other questions that people have, that either that you would put in the chat from before, or that have bubbled up for you, that you want to give voice to, so that we can spend a moment talking about that?
I have a quick question or point. I mean, do you see the whole thing being applicable to all ages, or could you identify certain sections and say this section might be better for ages like kindergarten through third, or through fifth, so that as we're going through it with like maybe the summaries for everybody, and then other sections that as we're going through it with a first and a fifth grader, we can say, if we're sitting here together, we can say, okay, we can do this, this, and this, which applies to all of them.
You can get
This-
some guidance.
We're gonna get some guidance as to what we could focus
guidance.
on, so that we're not losing the first grader when we're trying to go through midrash. And
Right.
at that point, just to put like a little parentheses at the top, like great for everybody, great for kindergarten through second grade or something like that.
Right. You're saying like to have a little icon or some kind of key that
Yeah,
indicates.
like a rate, like a game rating, or like to say that this is great for me.
Rated
Or if we had
E
a
for
cheat
everyone.
Right, or an E for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Or if we had a cheat sheet on the side that
Right.
we just kept, and it wasn't in the, just to give us some guidance, because each week is like an experiment for us, and we, sometimes it works, but sometimes we're losing our audience, and the time is kind of precious. Once you lose them, it's hard to get them back.
Right. I would recommend, I mean, off the top of my head, and while you're thinking, Mara, I think that I have a couple thoughts actually. I think sitting down with a first grader for even a few minutes to learn Parsha is extremely powerful. And if it's even like a matter of doing one question together, I promise you, you're doing more with your kid than most parents are doing with theirs. And they will remember that. If it's a positive, uplifting experience, and you were able to have even a conversation for a few minutes, you are training them to be able to speak with you and to be trusted by you, and to trust you, to be open and to think together and to talk and do it about something they know is holy and spiritual and part of their people's history. Even a few minutes of that is treasure. So if it's just a few and then you lose your audience, you're rock stars already. Like, that's great. Yeah, 100%. What I do with my younger kids, my 4-year-old, I don't expect anything from at all. If he wanders over while I'm doing it with the other ones, like I said, like that's already success to me. What I'll actually let him do is when he does come over, I'll let him look at the pictures, and he'll find one that's interesting to him. And that's what which picture do you like? And if he has a comment about it, we'll talk. I'll just follow that thread. Or if he has a question, like, what are they doing? Why is he sad? Why are they happy? Why is he running? Whatever the question is, so we can talk about it as a hook. But actually, more often than not, he'll tell me what he thinks about it. And to me, that's like him his level of interpretation, and that's great. We talk about it for a second. I affirm what he's saying, like, that's great. That's so cool. You saw that in that picture. He's like, yeah, we'll see ya. Like, that's it. He's done. And for me, that's successful. Or if he even just grabs it out of the hands of his 9-year-old brother and says, "This is mine," to me, that's also a success. It's like, that's great. It shows that he wants something from the Parsha. Like he wants a Parsha. He can't use it. He doesn't want to use it, but he wants to feel like it's his. To me, that's a success. It doesn't have to be like, oh, I taught him something and now I can. That's remove that pressure from yourself. Okay. For my first grader, so there too, I kind of let her. I kind of like feel it out where she's comfortable. We definitely do the 1-minute debate, but even that, she doesn't usually like taking an opinion, like taking a side. So I'll kind of throw it out there. I'll show her the Hebrew word pictures, and she kind of gets excited by that. But that's her, like to learn what the words are for that. And the rest of it, my kids are day school kids, so she comes with like her Parsha questions. She likes to find what pictures in the magazine already align with the things that she knows. But again, I'm not like pushing her into it. If it's like come as you are, like Mara said, like where if she shows interest in something, I'll do it, and if not, I'm not really pushing her at this age yet. I think as kids get into the 7 and 8-year-old range, they start to be a lot more inquisitive and want to investigate. They feel a lot more in control of reading and like knowing that they can do it, especially if you're sitting by their side. So even if it's for a few minutes to think like, this is mine, I'm going to look at pictures, I'll talk about whatever I want to. For now, I think that's a huge success. That's my opinion.
I also want to add, as we get ready to close out, that this is an incredible adventure and journey for all of us as parents doing this in some ways for the first time with our own kids, for those of us at Hadar on the creation end who are creating this for the first time, and being able to do this in partnership with all of you and with the hundreds and thousands of subscriptions that are out there, and being able to be in conversation with you and hear the feedback continues to help us to develop the kinds of materials that you want in your home to be able to use as Torah learning with your kids, and I think it helps to enrich the learning and the dialogue that's happening, and it goes both ways, right? So we would love for you to continue to be very in touch with us about the things that are working, the things that you have questions about, the resources that you as parents want and need that would be helpful in terms of supporting your own learning and being able to create learning experiences with your kids, because we can continue to we want to help support all of this learning that's happening in our homes, in our cars, in our family rooms, in all over the place. And it's a journey that we feel really blessed and honored to be able to be on with all of you, together as parents and those who are grandparents who are on this journey too. So thank you all so much for joining us and for adding your voices to this conversation. And we wish you all kinds of sweet Torah learning with Devash and everything else that you use. So good night. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.